I'm Steve Wilkerson, and I'm with Jim Saunders, Executive Editor of the News Service of Florida. Jim, Governor Scott recently indicated that he is opposed to Medicaid expansion. That hasn't always been his position. That's also the House position, as we're a little bit past the midway point in session. Does the governor's new stated position pretty much kill Medicaid expansion for this year?
Well, I think the expansion was always going to be a heavy lift for the Senate, has been pushing it. And they've tried to cast it as not a Medicaid expansion, but as putting these low-income folks into private health insurance that would be funded through Medicaid money. But they have been pushing this idea, which is supported heavily by the hospital industry and some other business groups, including Associated Industries of Florida, which is pretty influential around town. But it's always been a difficult prospect for them because the House has adamantly opposed, call it Medicaid expansion, call it whatever. They have opposed that vehemently for the last 2 years. And so it was looking like it was going to be difficult to pass anyway. But Governor Scott kind of parachuting in here and saying that he does not favor it certainly makes it harder. Remember back in 2013, the governor actually supported a Medicaid expansion, although he never really put a whole lot of muscle behind it. He did say he supported it, but and then it died in 2013 because of the same dynamics that we're seeing now, which is that the Senate wanted to do something along those lines. The House didn't, and it couldn't pass with only the Senate supporting it. So, I think his position makes it even harder to think that this is going to happen this year.
Well, there's another big health care funding issue. It's called LIP, Low Income Pool Funding. It's a joint federal-state program. It targets reimbursing hospitals that provide health care to indigent Floridians. And it's a like $2.2 billion program. The Senate wants it. There's a big issue there. House is opposed. Where is this headed?
Well, the House, actually both chambers want the money from the feds. And they realize that this is really important to the budget. And until this issue gets resolved with the federal government, they're going to have a hard time even coming up with a budget.
It's not in the House budget.
It is
right?
not in the House budget.
It is in the
Senate budget.
I got you.
Basically, the position of the Senate is that they're counting on this money, an agreement being reached with the federal government to continue the program. The program is set to expire on June 30th, unless the state and federal government can reach an agreement to extend it. The Senate's taking the position, budget-wise, that the money is going to be available, so they built that into their budget. The House is saying we can't put that in our budget at this point until we know what the terms of the money, if we're going to get the money, what the terms are, and how it's going to flow through. This is an extraordinarily complex program, and the federal government put the state on notice last year that if they wanted another extension of it, there's going to have to be changes made in it. And they have said flat out that the program will not be extended in its current form. But there is, holding out hope through these negotiations that the program will continue. So the House is basically taking the position, we need to wait and see what's going to come out of these negotiations. Now, the problem is that the legislative session is supposed to end on May 1st, and we are now well into April, and there's still no word from the feds and the state negotiators that there's going to be a deal. So it's hard to agree on a budget when there's this large of amount of money in flux. Worst case for the legislature is that no deal would be reached and that the state would have to somehow come up with a bunch of money to help make these hospitals whole.
And that can impact other issues, right?
Well, and that's what's going on right now. Until they can get some word on this LIP funding, everything is sort of on hold in the budget. There are all sorts of issues out there. Tax cuts. I mean, Governor Scott, in announcing that he opposes this Medicaid expansion, said, I'm focused on cutting taxes and increasing money for schools. Well, Senate President Andy Gardner quickly replied, well, if you don't get this LIP money issue resolved, you can't really resolve the tax cut sorts of issues, because it's not clear how much money they may have to spend on health care or how much they may get from the federal government. So there's all sorts of ripples going through here. Everybody at the Capitol is sort of watching this health care issue. Like I said, it's very complicated, and most people probably don't really understand the nuts and bolts of it, but they do understand that there's a whole lot of money involved, and until that money is resolved, it's going to be hard to do a budget. That's also led to a lot of speculation around the Capitol that they may not get done by May 1st, that this may be have to be an extended session or a special session sometime this summer. The budget has to be done and out the door by July 1st, the start of the fiscal year. So basically there's about a 2-month window here, from May 1st to July 1st that they could come back and do something more if they needed to.
You feel like there's kind of a big cloud right now kind of hanging over the process, that until something breaks on this health care funding issue, other things are not going to get resolved?
Well, I do. And, the other thing is that there's clearly a lot of tension between the House and the Senate right now on this. The Appropriations Chairman, Richard Corcoran, got up on the House floor on, last week during their budget deliberations and basically said, we are not doing this Medicaid expansion, drew the line in the sand, and was adamant that it's not going to happen. Well, and the Senate's trying to find a way to maneuver on that issue. In a lot of ways, the Senate is trying to connect the LIP issue and the Medicaid expansion issue as much as they can, because in a lot of ways they serve the same low-income, uninsured people who show up in the emergency rooms for care. The House is trying to keep the two issues completely separate. We can do the LIP if we get the money from the feds, and we don't have to do the Medicaid expansion. So there's a lot of tension back and forth, and Appropriations Chairman Corcoran got up and he basically made clear that ain't happening in the House in terms of the Medicaid expansion, and so that even added to more of the strain between the chambers.
Thanks, Jim. For more news about Florida politics and government, visit the Advances section of our website.